Now we move on to the sermon for today, and I've titled it as Fear or Fear Not. That is the question. So if you know Shakespeare got like to be or not to be, that is the question. So this is Fear or Fear Not, that is the question. So before we move on to the rest of the sermon, let's establish again this month's focus, which is to be determined. And for me, I usually need to understand the word in order for me to have a clear picture, because I need better understanding. So the better understanding is, according to the internet, determined means having a firm decision and being resolved not to change it, or possessing or displaying resolve. So yeah, resolve, right? Yeah. So I checked what this means. It means that they are very determined, they're purposeful kind of person. So with that in our mind, and with the title Fear or Fear Not, what to be determined about, right? So since we are in the topic of fear or fear not, let's talk about some of the biggest fear common in everybody's life. So I got this from the internet. These are some of the 8 biggest fear in everybody's life. So number 1 is fear of time. Then there's fear of imperfection, fear of vulnerability, fear of failure, fear of public speaking, fear of loneliness, fear of change, and fear of rejection. So with all this being said, there's actually a lot more fear in the world. And today, some of the articles also say fear of not having an identity is also part of the fear. That's where the LGBTQIA plus comes in. So there's got to add more to the alphabet lah. So now it's already plus already. So even if you see in American news today, like they do not restrict people from just your biological gender itself, right? And they allowed you to use whatever pronoun you feel deemed fit for yourself. There's even some person that say, I identify as a cat, and my pronoun is he, meow, meow, or something like that. So it's like they have a lot of weird things, and they say we are not subjected to our biological gender anymore, and a biological man can now compete in a woman's category and take a woman's category championship, though biologically they are men, but of course they transgender to woman, but your cell, your DNA is still a man, so you are a bit stronger. And they even start teaching kids in kindergarten that you yourself are not a boy or a girl. You don't know what you are right now because you may change in the future. So it's very confusing. There's no structure anymore. They want to mess up the structure. They want to tell kids that you are not a boy or a girl. You may not know now, you know in the future. You can be nothing as well. And they even introduced drag queen in kindergarten as well, to dance for them so that they are familiar with drag queens. That is very, very bad in America right now. So there are lots of fear. People, when they have fear, they start doing all these weird things to mess up everything. That's why what are these kind of fear? In the Bible, it says, these are all fear of spirit of fear. And you see in 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7, it says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Right? So all these are caused by the spirit of fear, and it does not come from God. I even wrote a little small remark here, and the spirit of fearfulness and timidity does not come from God. Amen. So now next verse. So in 1 John chapter 4 verse 18, it also says here, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So if you know someone loves you very much, you will not fear, right? So this will drive out fear. And another chapter also says in Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10, it says, do not fear, for I am with you. The I am here is God. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And with that being said, our God is also here to always provide for us, so we do not need to fear. For in this chapter, it says Matthew chapter 10 verse 29 to 31, it says, are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care, and even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Each and every one are worth more than sparrows, and God will take care of us. So regardless of what fears we have, not in our flesh, do not worry, for God is always our Almighty God, our great I am. And with that now established in our mind, what is the worldly fear, the spirit of fear? Let's go to a very interesting character. In the Bible, there is this character called Job. So the story of Job. Now, I believe many of us are familiar with the story of Job. Some of us that are not, then I could also recap the story for you. So there one day, actually God was challenging Satan. So here you can see in Job chapter 1 verse 8, God told Satan, hey, have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. And Satan says, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he is on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possession has increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. So he is saying that if you just let go of your hand, most likely Job would curse you, And God said, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So it basically means you can now do whatever you want with Job, but just do not touch his life, spare him his life. So here it's interesting that God challenged Satan that I have a servant, I have a man that fears me and is upright. So, and therefore the story is continued. So what did Satan do? Okay, so round one. So here, the first thing that Satan did was that one of his servants came in to him and reported to Job that the Sabeans have stolen all of Job's oxen and donkey and killed the attending servants. So you can also read here, there's a Bible verse down here if you want to refer. And then, immediately after the first servant came in to tell this news, the second servant came in, and then before Job could digest the news, another servant came and told him that fire from heaven had destroyed all his sheep and the servants looking after the sheep. So even the servants and the servants looking after the sheep is all dead now. Now, and then yet again, while Job was hearing the bad news of the second messenger, another servant joined in. The third servant told Job that the Chaldeans had stolen his entire stocks of mules and killed the workers. And you think if that's not enough, here comes the final round. A final servant came to Job and told him that a desert wind has knocked down the house where all his sons and daughter were having a party. So basically they were all killed together with the house. And this is all a very devastating news for one person to bear in one short day. And so he KO. So you can see, Job is in despair. But yet, this last news would have havoc on any sane man's mind. Yet, Job keep his head. Instead of blaming God, Job fell on his face in worship and reverence to the Almighty Lord. So this white color quote here is actually a quote from Bible. Job says that naked I came from my mother's womb and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. So even when he was so despaired, he said this quote. He trusts in God and said that whatever I have, God gave. If he take back, he take back. He just trusts God, though he is, of course, grieving and in despair. And yet, you think that's where Satan ends, and Satan was still not satisfied at stopping there. Instead, he continued his evil test on Job by bringing sickness to him through painful boils appearing on his skin. So you can see his skin is having all the skin disease and it's really, really painful one. So he's practically like a dead man but alive. Even his wife asked him to curse God and just die, which he did not. He still trusts God. But here you can see his friends all heard the news and they came to him. And his friends all assumed that his suffering is his fault. So now look at his friends. Who is his friends? These are the comforters who failed. Yeah. So first friend, Eliphaz. So I summarize for you guys. You can see here, Eliphaz accused Job of being presumptuous, wicked, and devoid of godly fear. So we can refer to some of the Bible verse here also. And Zohar told Job to put away his evil and his enjoyment of sin. And Bildad suggested that Job's son must have sinned in some way, so they deserve to die as they did. So imagine your friends telling you this. And this is actually a very long Bible verse. There's a lot of conversation going on back and forth. So these are basically the conversation that they have with Job. So, and then there's a fourth friend that though he sounds more sane, but at the end, it's still neither accurate. I will show you some. So this is the fourth friend, Elihu. So Elihu was the fourth group member who visited Job. Elihu was angry towards Job's three friends for not presenting a right answer to Job, but yet when his time came to speak, he did not have a proper answer to give to Job either. So here are some of the summary he gave. He believed that Job has spent too much energy vindicating himself rather than God. And Elihu explained to Job that God communicates with humans by two ways, vision and physical pain. And he says that physical suffering provides the sufferer with an opportunity to realize God's love and forgiveness. And when he's well again, understand that God has ransomed him from an impending death. And Elihu also assumes that Job must be wicked to be suffering as he is. He thinks that Job's excessive talking is an act of rebellion against God, right? So, isn't it if you're Job's position, you will be very discouraged as well, and then you're fighting, but you know in your heart that I still trust God. So, but why are they all saying this, right? So now, after everyone have gave their opinion, what did God have to say about this? So here, so there's 2 points that God want to bring forth to Job when he appeared to them. So the first is that God is under control. So first, if you read the Bible verse here, Lord actually reminded Job that he was in charge of the universe and that he had not fallen asleep. And God's first response made Job understand that the great universe in which Job lived could only function due to God's almighty power that keeps everything in place. And nothing can fall out of place unless he allows it, even humanity's suffering. So that is the first point God told Job. The second point, so the second point is similar, but here is also God saying that he has total control over the events in every human being's life. So God asked whether Job has the power to control the creature he had made, like the Leviathan. So it's a very dangerous creature. No, we don't see it now, but in the Bible they have a description for this. And it's a dangerous creature that lives far away from human interference. Of course, Job's answer was no. So God's point is this: if Job cannot control such a dangerous creature, how can he control the events in his life? So ultimately, it's still God that is in control of everything, and he's still the master of the universe. So with this, before we move further, you would think that everybody knows the moral of the story is Job is still, he trusts God, and he is the one that ultimately fear God, right? But if you really read from the beginning to the end, you can also see Job's conversation, right? He himself actually went back and forth. In the beginning of the verses, you can see there's some radical changes in Job's thought pattern, actually. So he begins in the same place as his friend, If you read in the beginning, he also doubt God a little. There's some conversation that makes him look like he doubt God. But he will not stay there. He knows he is innocent, and yet he is suffering terribly. So this actually blows up everything he thought he knew about God. And let's see how his thought process through his 8 speeches. So here are some of the verses that Job put up his conversation. So you can see the first verse, he says, God won't see me anymore after I'm dead. So it's like, oh, God won't see me, like, I'm better dead than nothing and stuff like that. No, and then second verse, you can see, I wish I could speak to God in person, and there is no mediator to go between us and make it possible. And then third one, you can see, my suffering would have a purpose, if I could die and have God's wrath pass me by. Then he could resurrect me and forget all my iniquities. But that will never happen. And then he followed by, since I am innocent and God is good, there must be a mediator between God and me. My weakness is in heaven. He who will argue my case before God as a son of man does with his neighbor. And then he goes on with, since my Redeemer lives, resurrection must also be possible, like the dual keys required to launch a nuke. This companions truth of a mediator and a resurrection unlocks God's hope for the first time in the book. And then he says, my heart faints within me. And he followed on with, God often allows the wicked to prosper. He can do as he please. And then, though he utterly terrifies me, all I want is to see God. Even if I die, I will be laid bare and visible before God. So you can see how he transitioned a bit. He also somewhat got revealed to him there would be a mediator eventually, of course, which is Jesus. But here you can see in the beginning, he would feel like, it's better that I die, I've never been born, I don't have to go through suffering. Then after that, he slowly understand that ultimately you are God, you can do as you please, and I still trust you. So what are the main differences? Because if we really view this whole passage in today's logical carnal mind, we would tend to see there's no real right or wrong between both parties, right? But there is a main difference. The main difference between Job and his friends is not that Job suffers and they do not, or is it that Job understands suffering in a way that they do not. But the main difference is that Job fears God and they do not. So they fear God, but his friends do not. So why this? I say this because, okay. So while Job's suffering provides topic for their friends to debate, the heart of their conflict is over what it means to fear God. So you can see some of the Bibles, the friends was all discussing what it means to fear God. What is it to fear God? And you're not fearing God this way, right? So the message of this book is not so much about how to deal with suffering, but about how to fear God even through suffering. And without the fear of God, one must hold a religious system of worldly karma. They will believe that you do good. So where we are good with God, as long we try to be good people. But the true fear of God acknowledges the necessity of innocent substitutionary suffering, which of course is also Jesus, right? So, and if a really, really good person can suffer terrible things, then maybe in contrast to that, the wicked can also somehow be justified and made right with God. So if someone that is good in this world can suffer, also there's a possibility the wicked can also be made justified by the righteousness of God. So therefore, the focus is not on the suffering, but it's on the fear of God. So in bigger picture, this is also in relation with Jesus' death for all sinners. So now, that's why the main point of this story is that it's not about the suffering and how he overcome or whatever, but it's the fear of God. And ultimately, we are called to fear God. And what is the fear of God? So, these are some of the Bible definitions. So the fear of the Lord is a reverential awe of God, a reverence for his power and glory, and it is a total acknowledgement of all that God is, which comes through knowing him and his attributes. So like for me, I don't know what is reverence first, so I go and check. So reverence also means deep respect and trust for God and all his power and his glory, trusting whatever he do is right, and that we trust him and his process. So therefore you can see at the end, Job actually say this. He say, though he slay me, yet I would trust in him. So here are also some of the Bible verse for the fear of the Lord in the Bible to encourage us. So here you can see in Psalms, it is the beginning of wisdom. It says that the fear of Lord is the beginning of wisdom and leads to good understanding. And it also says here in Proverbs, only fool despise wisdom and discipline. Other than that, it also says that the fear of the Lord leads to life, rest, peace, and contentment. The fear of the Lord is also the fountain and life and provides a security and a place of safety for us. Amen. So other than that, sometimes if we read this and then we don't read the following passage or the whole bigger picture, I myself would get down. I'd be like, oh, so whatever God give me, I accept lah. You know, bad things happen. It's like that, because there's no good or bad. God will vindicate me, will nothing, right? So, but that's the half of the story. The fools, that's why you must read the whole book of Job. And at the end, better is coming, right? So here is that when Job's test was over, God rewarded him with double what he lost. Even if we lose something from our life, God has something redemptive planned. He often replaces what we have lost with something better and greater. Therefore, we must not despair when things seem to start going haywire in our life. Instead, we must wait for God to deliver us, bringing us into a new dimension of his goodness. Better days are ahead. We must hold on to the unshakable hand of God and trust him to provide for our everyday needs. So ultimately, we must always learn to trust God and know him in his entirety. That's why there's also just now when I have the definition of fear of the Lord, it also says that acknowledging of all that God is, which comes through knowing him and his attributes. Attributes also means his character, personality. So we must know God, then we will have the full fear of God. And ultimately, here is just a word of encouragement. In God I trust, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? So this is the end of my sermon.